Notion just dropped not one, not two, but 3 major updates. Oh, and they announced Notion Mail. Absolutely insane. So in this video, let's take a quick look at all of these changes and how you can start using them today. Plus, you'll get an exclusive preview of Notion Mail at the end of this video. The 3 updates are Notion Forms, a new layout builder for databases, and finally proper database automations. All of them deserve their own video, but I wanted to give you a quick overview over all of them and get you started before all the deep dives release. But keep an eye on this channel over the next few days because there are a lot more videos coming. So, first up, Notion Forms. Notion Forms are a new type of database view, which means if you have already an existing database for which you would like some form to collect input, you can simply create it through all the normal means, right? So either by going through the 3 dots and changing the layout type, or clicking on plus here and saying, well, I want a new form. If you do so, and you do that on an existing database, it will ask you whether it should automatically take the properties that you have and create corresponding questions for you. So let's do that to speed up the process. And then we see immediately the really, really cool UI of this. First, form title. Now in this example, we have, it's feature suggestions. So, we have different teams, sales, customer success. They talk to clients, they talk to potential clients, and they of course have suggestions for our product team. And to make it easier for the product team to, prioritize these, we have a database, and now we can give, the different departments, can give them forms so they can easily add new information to that and don't even have to go on the main database. So that's the goal here. So we will call this add suggest a new feature. We could add a description if we wanted to, and we can here up top change who can fill out this form. We'll talk about this in a second, but basically what you can do is you can either have only internal people filled out, or you can make a form public so that anyone can add suggestions to it. Next, we see that every single property of ours has to be turned into one of these questions. And Notion, of course, automatically maps up the correct answer type. So if it's a text field, or in this case, the main property of the database, it's text. If it's like a select one, right, we have like these boxes here. And if it's like, let's go down there. If we have a relation, we get a relation picker. Within this UI, we can then make the usual changes that we expect from forms, right? So we can drag and drop elements to reorder them. We can click on the 3 dots to get additional options, like making a property like an answer required, right? If we want to make sure that someone fills it out. And we can also add a little bit context in here, right? Like things like, okay, how important is this really? And of course, like the type of options, right? Like they will depend on the question or like the property that is underlying. But then we always have as the options down here, the option to sync with the property name, which means if we change the name here, we'll change it for the property. We can have a look at our linked property, right? So where does it actually feed to? And we see, okay, these are our options. So if we wanted to add more options, we could do this right here. But the same would happen if we add more options here. That would also be added to the property automatically. And last but not least, we could also, of course, switch the question type. Now, if we switch the question type, Notion will, of course, also change the underlying property. So now if we go back to table, we see that property has been turned into text. So that's something to be aware of when you build these forms, right? That you cannot like have the question be independent from the type of, the filler. So both of these things are closely linked. Oops, use case, that was wrong. That was supposed to be text. This one was supposed to go back to select. If we want to add new questions, we can do that directly here from the form builder, right? So we don't have to create a property first. We can simply click on add a question. We can say, okay, what should this be? And we see we have all the main property types from Notion available. So in this case, I would also like, to just know who, who should work on this maybe. Who's the best person to talk to about this? Because it might be different from the person who filled out the form. And then as we see, if we go back to our database, we see that we have now a new property created here about, who's the best person to talk to. So that's very, very important to keep in mind, right? Like changes on the question in terms of the title and the type carry over. You can turn off that the title carries over, but the type will always carry over. And if you create a new question, you will create a new property. Now, the other way around, if you delete a question, this doesn't necessarily delete the underlying property. So if I, let's say the customer demand, right? If I remove this question, if we go back to our database, we see that the customer demand property is still here. But currently, that is only the case if your properties in here, if you have already answers in here. If you had no answers whatsoever in the database, right? So if you start with a clean database, then deleting the question will actually also delete the underlying property. So a little bit careful there. When you're ready to publish your form, you can go back to the form builder view and you can go on share form. So that's a very important distinction. The view that you have here on the database is not the view that others will use to fill it out. It is simply the place where you can edit the form. So in order to share the form, we want to click on share form, and now we get a link. And we can either just share this with, in the browser, and then like it's a standalone page. I'll show you in a second how it looks like, or we can paste it anywhere in Notion, embed it here, and now we have the actual form to fill out. And we see Notion gives us automatically this like little line around it. We see at the top as the user, right, like we're submitting a response as Matthias. That's because on the form we said that when people respond to it, we don't want anonymous responses. We will track who responds. And then we have all the different properties. So just like to see like how it looks like when you fill it out, right? Like so something cool. The priority is low. Use case, it's again a text field, right? It's again a select field, all the same. The relation picker is really, really cool because this will pull in now all the entries in that other database. So you can say, well, okay, this was for sales. So it's automatically connecting that relation. And then if we wanted another person right in here, we could say, well, actually Jill is the best person to talk about. And then once I hit submit, we'll see here, this confirmation, we've emailed you a link to your response, and we've done that. And if I look to the table, we see now that we have something cool down here, sales, automatically create a relation, right? And Jill as the person who we should talk to. If you want to know who submitted this entry, that's as usually behind the created by property, right? So if you don't have it on our database, you can simply add it and it will be there. In this case, it's of course all the same person. But if we go to our form and say we allow for anonymous responses, then this will actually show anonymous if we don't have people then select like who they are. This is already great for internal use cases, but it's also super, super powerful when you want to collect input from people outside of your Notion workspace. In order to do so, you can click on change. And then here under where also like the share form settings, you can flip who can fill it out from anyone at MF Consulting to anyone on the web with a link. That's basically the equivalent to publishing a Notion page. Now there are two things that are very important for this. The first one is that in general, you can share a form without sharing the underlying database, which means you don't need to expose, your feature requests or like whatever it is that you collect with the person who's filling out the form. They really can only fill out that form and the underlying database doesn't have to be shared. But there's currently one exception, and that is if you have a relation to another database, right? So in this case, we have this relation to a Teams database, which is a different one. So here, if we try to now change this to anyone on the web with a link, we will get this error. These questions are not supported in public forms and will not be shown to respondents. And that's because if you have a relation to another database, that related database would have to be shared. Because of course, right, if someone clicks into that relation, they will be shown all the entries in that database. And it only works if they have access to it. So to summarize, that means, right, you can share the initial form on the database itself without any worries. Your underlying data will not be exposed. But if you want them to fill out relations automatically, you would need to share that other database. So for now, we can just say, got it, right? This will exclude this one form. We can like copy it and we can just go to an anonymous browser. We can paste that in and we see how that looks like, if you share it with someone on the web. We also get this really nice clean look. We have this like little made with Notion icon here at the top. They can submit it. So let's say, something. And we have like a medium here, and then we will click on submit. And now if we go back to our Notion form, we will see that this responds as something that has been recorded by anonymous. Because that's of course the case, right? If you share it with anyone, by default, they will not be logged into Notion, so you won't know who exactly answers. So if you want to collect like who it is and get back in contact with them, make sure to collect the email address or something of the like. Last but certainly not least, you can of course also create forms by simply typing now /form. And as always, right, when you create a new database somewhere, it will, in this case, same with charts, give you the form editor, but also give you the underlying database, to collect all the responses. Forms will be available on every Notion plan. So even on the free plan, you can have an unlimited number of forms and an unlimited number of responses. The only thing that's behind the paid plan is the option to further customize the form. So if you are on the form, right, if you are on a paid plan, you will be able to go on the three dots and then say customize form. And here can change both the text and the color of the submit button, and then the confirmation page, right? For everyone else, it will be the same page. On paid plans, you will be able to change that. Plus on paid plans, you will also be able to change the Notion logo, right, on the published form, so you can remove the branding. But still, pretty much all the functionality available for free. Now, before we continue, big shout out to the sponsor of this video, Shortform. Shortform creates amazing book summaries for non-fiction books and even provides context for the core ideas. It's perfect to quickly check out the book to see whether this is actually something you're interested in. And then once you're done with it, you can also quickly revisit the core ideas without having to go through the whole thing again. As I'm currently in the process to build the #1 Notion consultancy in Europe, I have a ton of business books on my backlog to read, and very little time to actually go through all of them in detail. Thanks to Shortform, I can quickly go through the most important ideas, and they even include exercises to make sure that what I read also sticks. Plus, Shortform just released their browser extension, which allows you to summarize anything you come across on the web. So for example, if you want to check out what the Forbes article has to say about Notion, but can't read the whole thing, you can just click on the summary, you get all the major points, you get some context on what Notion is, and it even tries to give you some counter arguments, which is super helpful, right, if you don't want to just blindly follow along. To get started with Shortform and their incredibly detailed summaries, check out the link in the description for a free trial and also for a 20% off voucher. Next up, Notion is getting a major UI upgrade with the new custom layout options. This is probably the biggest change to databases in years, and it's super exciting. In order to use it yourself, what you want to do is you want to open up any database entry. And once you do that, you will see that there's now a new option when you hover over the title. Besides adding the cover and an icon if you don't have one yet, you can now see that you have this customize layout option. Let's just open this in a full page so we can fully enjoy it. Right, so this is the default version how it looked before. We had basically just our vertically stacking properties. Sure, we could move some elements in the page body if we wanted to, but still fairly limited. Now, the second we click on Customize Layout, we enter a new builder that reminds us a little bit of Notion's site. So I'm excited that Notion is adding more and more features like this. And basically, there are three big changes when it comes to the way that we can display properties here in the main area. We have now pinned properties, which appear under the page title directly, and they stack horizontally. So the same way that previously only you had in the wiki, when you turned any database into wiki, right, you had these horizontally stacking properties. Now everything that we pin up here stacks like this. We then have a property group, which basically is the catch-all for all properties that don't get a specific location somewhere else. And then we have highlights. So for every element that we choose to highlight, we can pull it out of this collection and add it down below. And then of course there's a fourth big change, that's the side panel. But let's talk about one thing after another. First, time to highlight some properties that we always want to really drive the focus to. And for projects, that will probably be the status, the owner, and the completion rate. In order to pin anything, what we can do is we can either click up here, right, into the sample project area, and now we see all our properties that are not pinned, and we can click on the pin icon to add it here. So let's say we want to have the status there, and you see status pops up here. We want the owner, and owner pops up next to it, right, stacking horizontally, and we want the completion. Maybe we also want the dates as the last thing. And now we see at a glance, we have the most important information up here. One thing that you'll notice as I pin these properties is that they disappear from the property group. And that's very important to keep in mind. Every property can only be in one location. So you cannot have something pinned in the property group, highlighted separately and also in the panel. And you see that also if I go now here, right, and say, let's highlight actually the owner, let's pull him down, we see that it disappears from up there. In order to move it back, we can either go back to the heading, right, and repin it. That's one option. Or we can click on the three dots. And if we click on the three dots next to a property, we can say that we want to move it back to the property group, which is just this catch-all for everything that is not highlighted, not pinned. Yeah, that's the easiest way. And now it's back here. Let's quickly talk about property highlights. So if I want to highlight the revenue and the AI summary, I can do so by clicking on plus, and then I could say revenue. Now, two things here. First, if it's a number, you can choose this large display to draw more attention to it. And the second thing, per highlight, you can always have one property, right? So you can't create more horizontally stacking things or more of these groups. But still, I can have to pull the revenue out, and I can pull out the AI summary, and I can drag the AI summary at the top right, so just I always know what this project is about. One element that can be a bit confusing to use is the relation option, right? So relations can also be pulled out as page sections. It's similar to before, right? Also before you were able to show these page sections on the page, and it kind of has both options still, right? So if I click on the six dots, we see that if we go to here, we can convert it to a relations group, and now it's called a relations group. It will be below the whole properties, but it pretty much otherwise behaves just like before. So if I wanted to change it, right, I can now click back on here and say I will add to the layout, and not as a relation group, right, but as this task display. And then I could also click on add to property group to move it back in to tidy the whole thing up. Speaking of cleaning things up, while it's not possible to create several property groups, we can now organize the components within that property group. So if we click on it, we see that we have now this section option. So I could say, for example, well, there are some properties that people should access and some properties that they should not access. So we can block them from it, but we can, add UI elements to help them understand what they are for. So let's say we add like a project management section. All right. Now we have this here, and we can add a second section, which is like the general options, and then maybe a third one for just backend to explain that this is like maybe the things that you don't need to look at all the time. So let's move general to the top, project management to the middle, and then backend at the bottom. So for general, right, like the owner is probably general, and I can simply drag and drop them between that. The priority is also general. Blocked by and is blocking, those are both project management, and then maybe departments, tasks, and last edit time. Those are like the backend properties that I don't always care about. We can even hide them so that they are not always hide and always hide. And also this always hide, so they're just not visible, but we see, okay, there would be something here. And now you see, we get here this little division between general, the project management, and the backend. This one is empty because none of them show, but let's always show them. And now people can, modify them a lot more easily. Last but certainly not least, the panel. Notion is loving side panels. So it's no surprise that also for database layouts, we're getting a new side panel. And that basically allows us to move a whole section from here to this area. And the things that we can move there are one, every highlight, and then B, the property group. We can of course not move the main element, right? That wouldn't work, but everything else that can be moved to the side. So we could, for example, say that like this property group, right? Like this, you often have the situation, you have maybe like 15, 20 properties, and you have to scroll past all of them to get to the body of the page. That's no longer the case. You can simply either drag and drop it to the side, or you can click on the three dots here, right? Say move to panel, or click here on add to panel, and then pick any of the existing things if you want to add them there. But for the property group, let's just drag it over there, and then let's also drag the revenue over there. And then you see we have the same options here and here. So we could just keep adding, like highlights either on the side panel or on the main area, and then just makes it a whole lot cleaner overall. Once we're happy with how everything looks, we can then apply it and save it. And here's where one very important caveat comes in. The layout builder is amazing, but it is one layout per database. So what's currently not yet possible is that you create different templates for different elements. Maybe you have different types of projects in your projects database, and all of them get a different layout. So far, it's one layout per database, but hopefully that's something they add in the future. And that's also why it says apply to all pages here on top, right? And the dropdown is not applied to some pages. No, it's just restore to original layout. So let's apply this to all pages. We save it, and now we're back in the normal thing. And we see now this much cleaner look. We have our sample project, we have our pinned properties at the top, we have an AI summary here, and none of the other properties disturb us. But if we want to see them, we can simply click here on the view details area, and this will show me now all the other properties, so people can change the settings and can modify it. But overall, this makes it a lot easier to navigate big databases. Instead of toggling on the sidebar up here, you can also always click on the three dots. That will also show you the sidebar or hide it. And as a keyboard shortcut, Command-Shift / which is unfortunately pretty much impossible to hit on a German keyboard. So I can't show that to you here, but you can use it if you're an American one to just toggle the sidebar on and off. To close this topic, just one word of warning. So if we go back to customizing the layout, we see that when we hover over any property, right, we can also remove it from layout. Now, when we do the remove from layout option, we get a pop-up that warns us and will ask us, well, do you want to remove this from the layout? Which is basically just means you hide it, right? So you change the visibility settings. Or do you want to remove it from layout and database, which means you delete it. So very careful. I think this is a bit of an oopsie in terms of the UI wording. I hope they change it in the future, because it is kind of confusing, right? I would much rather have it, be labeled as hide or something like that, and then the delete option much clearer. Because again, it can be quick and easy that you actually accidentally pick the wrong option here, and then your property is gone. And if all of this wasn't enough already, we're also getting a major item of our wish list. And that is that we can finally access dynamic data within our database automations. This is a huge unlock because it means that for the first time, we can start doing a lot of the things that previously required dedicated tools like make.com or Zapier directly in Notion. Let's kick things off with a very simple example. Here we have a database with our different client work, and then we have time entries, and we want to be able to track our time. We're not going to build a whole time entry thing, right? I have separate videos on this, and I will record a new one with this new setup. But just to show you that now basically we can click a button here and then have a time entry that is named after the project. That's already a huge step. So let's click here, add a button, and then we can say, okay, add time entry. And now if you click on automation, you see the new automation builder. So first, if it is a button, right, we can give it a button. So just click me. And then for when button is clicked, we can say, please add a page to the time entries database. So let's look for time entries. Here we are. And now if we go for the name, one thing that you'll see is you, instead of like hard coding an element, right, like time entry, you now can click on this formula option. And this allows you to dynamically reference the properties from the entry that triggered this automation. So let's click on here and let's say, okay, whenever this is clicked, and we see here the properties, whoever clicked, or like this page, right, a page that triggered the click, this page dot name. So that pulls in now the name, right? So if you just have that, it's exactly the same name. But if you want to like have also time entry for, we could just say time entry for, and then plus, and then we have this, and then we click on save, click on done. And now whenever we click this button, we get time entry for design workspace VC firm, time entry for create onboarding for scale up. But it doesn't stop here. We can take it one step further. Not only is it possible to map over all the properties, right, from our entry where we start to the new entry, we can also reference related entries and those properties. Here's a scenario. You have client work, your projects, and you have tasks. And then you have a third database with your client. Now, whenever you add a new project to a client, you want to go through a series of probably kickoff or onboarding tasks. And you want to make sure that these are always assigned to the person who owns the client. Well, finally, we can do that completely in Notion. So let me walk you through it. Let's create a new automation. And this time, let's call this, set onboarding tasks. So you see also like that these, formulas are available both in button automations and in the regular database automations. And then we say add trigger whenever a new page is added to this. Then what I want to do is first I want to define a variable. This is necessary basically whenever we want to reference the properties from a related entry. We don't need to do it for the direct mapping, then we can just write our formulas. But here we first need to pull in sort of like the client value that connects to it. So let's just click in here and let's call this client. And then we go into formula and we say, please here, give me from the trigger page, the client. Right? Remember, this is a little bit, can be a little bit tricky to remember like which page you're on, but you're on the projects page. So we want to grab the client that belongs to a specific project and we can save. And we can have a second action. And the second action, we can now say, now please add pages to our client tasks database. Here we go. And now for the name, right, we could reference something from this main property we wanted to. We could also automatically assign it, right, like connect it to the page that triggered it, right? That was also possible before, but, and that's new, we can now say, well, the assign to, I would like you to dynamically pick the client from the assigned element. So we go to client, and then we say first, because it can only be one element, and then we want to get the owner of the connected client. Then we click on save, we click on create. And now if I go in here, right, and say, okay, so let's for client B, let's create, like a test project, create a new project in here. We have a new element. And in a moment, this automation will trigger, create our task and automatically assign. So here it is, right? We didn't put a name in for the task, but it's automatically assigned to the person who owns client B. Now there are a ton of really, really cool use cases for this. For example, we can finally have recurring tasks in Notion. Going over that though would, go a little bit beyond the scope of this video. So keep an eye on the channel. We'll have like a dedicated tutorial on this specific one and then a dedicated one for recurring tasks soon. For now, just want to show you two more really neat little use cases for this. They both have to do with syncing up the status from a project with a corresponding task. So in this case, what we want to achieve is whenever we set a project to done, we want to make sure that all our tasks are also set to done. So in this case, right, I add two status properties. And what we can do now here on the client work one, so go again and say, okay, new automation, finish project. And we can say whenever we set the status of any project to complete, then I want you to go in and change the corresponding task status. Then on the action side, we again need to start by defining a custom variable. In this case, we need to pull in the tasks. So I can click on edit formula and we can say from the trigger page, please pull in client tasks. Okay. Now the next action will be to edit pages in. So we go for the edit pages in option. And one new thing that we'll see is now when we select the database, we have the option beside picking a specific database, we can pick tasks. So everything that we pulled in from the previous step. So we can say, okay, on tasks, please edit a property, please set the status to complete. All right. Now let's create this, let's start it. And now the second we set our test project to complete it, and let's actually add another, like a third task here that doesn't belong to this project, just so we see that it really only picks the correct ones. So let's pick a different one. Once we set this now to done, After a moment, it will set task 1 and task 2 also to done. There we are. Now, one thing that is very important to keep in mind and that can cause a little bit of confusion in the beginning is that the variables and the formulas are only accessible through these relation elements. So one area where we can't do that is we can't use dynamic data in our filters. So you might remember previously one of the most typical actions that you would take with database automations was to say edit pages in, and then instead of like picking a variable, right, we pick a specific element. So for example, we pick the a different database, and now we say edit all pages in. And here under all pages we have of course filters, and these filters still can't reference the dynamic values. So it's not possible to say, okay, if I have a specific type of project, please go in and have edit all pages that share like a certain element. So you can't search based on a name or something like that. They have to be related in order for these triggers to work, which kind of limits it to not all use cases, but still already being able to modify related entries is a huge step up. And now quickly, the corresponding automation. The other way around, we of course might also want to set a project to in progress the second we start working on any single task. And that we can do the other way around. So we go here on the task level, we create an automation, start project. And here the trigger will be that we have status is changed to anything but to do. And then we want to have on the action side, again, first we need to have a custom variable in order to pull in the related project. So I want to say project, and that will be from task, from our trigger page, the client work element, save, and then another action, and we will say here edit pages in, and now we have again access to all the related entries right on the project, and here we can say please set the project in this case to the in progress level. Then we can create it. And now here, if we take, task number 3, right, and set this to in progress or in done, it will kickstart the design workspace for Berlin VC firm in a moment and set this also to in progress. Notion's notification game is also getting stronger for the automations because one of the new actions that is available is to send an email. So you can connect to your Gmail account, and then you can, when a certain action happens, so for example, whenever you set your client status to done, you can trigger an email that confirms that, similar to the Slack notifications that you could already use in the past. This is how it looks like. We have, in this case, right, our status set to complete, and then we want to send an email. Now, unfortunately, currently we have access to our variables only in the subject and message, not in the send to field. So I hope that changes soon, because that means right now, right, we can't dynamically send it to the person that it is assigned to, or a certain field. We can only customize the content. So it's not, ideal to send the client a confirmation, but we can send internal confirmations or just hard code certain rules together with more specific triggers to say, okay, this and this is done, but at least we can reference, the property. So we could say, okay, for example, we just completed, and then reference here with the add option, right? We just completed the trigger page, or even use the formula to fill in some more complicated logic and pull in other properties as well. All of these updates are rolling out today, so you should soon start seeing them in your Notion workspace. But there is also a fourth big change coming to Notion. Marketplace. Marketplace is replacing the current Notion template gallery, and it comes with a range of features that will turn Notion into a proper online store. First, Notion template creators will be able to take payments directly through Notion. We don't know all the details yet, but it looks like we'll have a 10% flat fee, which makes Notion then cheaper than both of the main competitors, Gumroad and Lemon Squeezy. And just like those, Notion will act as merchant of records, which means they handle VAT for you and you don't have to deal with these taxes yourself. Second, as a customer, if you buy a template through Marketplace, you will have up to 14 days to return it for a refund. But if you return it, it will also be removed from your workspace. This is actually a huge change and will mean that Notion templates will become even more of a product category than they were before. What's more, creators will be able to lock a template, which stops users from just duplicating it into another workspace, making it much harder to pirate a Notion template. And of course, we'll also get analytics and reviews right on the marketplace. So while this isn't a direct change to the product, this is still a huge change for the whole Notion ecosystem, so I thought it's best to include it here. If you're a user, you should also see these new changes in the marketplace soon. And as a template creator, right now only a few select have early access, but the team is onboarding new creators as fast as possible. If you want to join, you can go to your creator profile, link in the description, and apply. And now it's time for Notion Mail. First things first, Notion Mail is currently not publicly available, but you can sign up for the waitlist. The link is in the description. Notion Mail will be a separate standalone app, similar to the way that Notion Calendar works. And the official launch for Notion Mail will be early in 2025. But here's already a sneak peek. Again, keep in mind that this is the early alpha, so a lot of things might still change before the release. But I think it's already really clear that we're getting an email client that is just through and through Notion. So, I mean, just look at the whole thing. And I want to show you a few things in specific. So let's say we want to write an email. So we click on writing a new email. We have our usual composer here, right? I can say who I want to send it to. And then here in my normal email composer, I can now just, start typing, of course, like in any other email client. But since it's Notion, I have my slash commands. So I can just type /h1, right, to get a heading. I can, add like a quote to like really capture a thought. I have even my callouts, right? So all the elements in Notion that we have typically in order to do things, you can pull them now into email and make it much, much easier to create, like well-designed emails rather than having to struggle with your typical, type form settings. The most Notion thing ever about this, though, is that we will get views and properties. And that is insane for our emails. So as you might see on the inbox here in the top right corner, we already have filters and edits. So under filters, right, we have the usual options to like narrow these things down. And under edit, we see that we can create actually new properties. Really, really cool. So let me show you this in action. Because what we can do instead of like, work on our inbox, we can also set up specific views. So let's say I want to set up a view for my favorite newsletters. So I will start blank, blank empty view. I want to call this, my favorite newsletters. I will continue, and I will not choose, a pre-structured ordering method because I want to pick my own. I will create a view, and then under here, I will get, first my normal inbox view, but now I can go ahead and modify it. First of all, I want to make sure that it actually doesn't show my inbox, but it shows my archive, because that's where my newsletters automatically go through the settings. Next, I want to go to edit and say, please group this. And under group, I will pick now person and now pick the specific senders from whom I want to see the emails here. So of course, let's do an example. I want to see Ali Abdal here as one sender. And the other sender that I would like to see here is redreads.co. And now you see already here on the side that it starts pulling in those specific emails. We need to refresh quickly and then Redreads will also show. All right, here we go. And now we could go to edit and add a property and say, for example, all right, on my emails here, what I would like is to have a summary property. So I can add that to it. And now if I am over any email, I can now, just like in a Notion database item, click on it. And I see here now, add summary. We can go here and say, well, what is this about? Like, this was a really cool email. You can, through this, take notes on these different properties. And back on my view, these properties start showing up, right? So if I use tags or people to assign them to someone, well, you start seeing like how we can build something that is much, much cooler than just a regular old email inbox. There are a bunch of other amazing features too, but I just want to quickly touch on a few highlights. For example, we will have an autopilot that will help us, set these properties automatically for us and organize our inbox, right? Automatically identify whether an email, for example, belongs to sales or whether an email is about, a certain job inquiry. We can, of course, manage our Gmail filters from here. We can create snippets, right, which is absolutely amazing. So we can just type / and then have a bunch of these auto-expanding elements where we can even use variables, right? So here you see an example where they use this first name variable, and then you can use it several times in the email. And again, just by clicking on this variable, you will be able to fill it across the place. So overall, right, just a lot of thoughtful things that make me really, really excited to answer my emails again. We don't know yet how the actual integration with the rest of the Notion ecosystem will look like once Notion Mail officially releases. But you can already tell from these first impressions that we will get a super, super powerful email client that has the same philosophy as Notion. It allows us to build and tailor our systems to the way we want to work and we want to interact with it, rather than following these very strict guidelines of what email should be, or what Gmail thought about 20 years ago. Overall, an absolutely insane week for Notion. Which of these updates is your favorite? Let me know down below in the comments. And if you would like to hear from Notion's co-founder himself about what else the future might bring for Notion, then check this video out next. Just click here and I'll see you in a second.